Hello and welcome to DCTV's Primaries edition of Candidate Conversations. I'm Michele McCray, Member Services Coordinator here at DCTV. Today I'll be speaking with your candidates for delegate to the House of Representatives, Mayor, City Council Chair, and other City Council hopefuls from Wards 1, 3, and 5. As a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, DCTV will ask each candidate the same questions. We will allow about 5 minutes per response. Here are the candidates for Ward 3 Member of the Council. We have joining us today Ben Bergmann, running for the seat of Ward 3 Council Member. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to participate in the conversation today.
We're excited too. Thank you for being with us. So for the first question, what's your vision for Ward 3 and the city's future, and what will you do as the Ward 3 Council Member to achieve that vision?
Yeah, I think the reason why I'm running in this election is I think that increasingly it's impossible to raise a family here. It's so unaffordable, from housing to childcare to transit being inaccessible in many parts of the ward and the city. I'm deeply concerned about what happens if we don't take those issues seriously and really get ambitious. And so my vision is for a city that doesn't look like that, a city where every family can thrive, where people can move here, find their footing, raise a family here, and then age in place on a fixed income. And that requires making significant changes in some of our housing policies. We have got to build more homes in Ward 3. We've got to build market rate housing. We've got to build more affordable housing. We have to do everything, and we have to have an all of the above approach, and we can't afford to go slow any longer. And I think what the Ward 3 council member needs to do is be pushing neighbors in our community to get on board. Let's all get to yes, let's make these projects better, but we can't delay what is necessary to make that vision a reality of an affordable city for everybody. And then the other thing on childcare, we have got to fully fund birth to 3 so that will cap some of those childcare payments, and it will make sure that our educators are paid properly. But one of the things that I'm talking about is that we cannot stop at birth to 3, which still leaves a substantial portion of your income dedicated for childcare, 30% on childcare, plus 30, 40% on housing, which is not unrealistic. That makes it impossible to live here for many people. So I'm talking about a long-term plan to make DC the first state in the nation to expand public education beyond pre-K3 to the toddler years and the infant years. This is very doable. We can do it in a phased approach, and it will be absolutely transformative for people. And the other thing, transportation, that's a big thing, but we have got to have vision again. We've got to not be afraid of big things. Transit policy is long-term, so we have to kind of be invested for the long term. We can't do what we did with the streetcar, where we spent all this money, built a 1 mile line, and then decided, let's shelve it. And then now people point to and say, oh, it's not very useful. We have got to have vision and pursue that while navigating what's going to be some hard times in the future. And key to that is having an independent voice on the council, someone who can succeed Mary Che, but do so in a way that carries on her legacy of asking hard questions, pushing pause on legislation that's not well thought out, and pushing our agency heads to be transparent, because we have a huge problem in this city. It's a one-party town. The incentive structure is that, you just kind of go along, get along. You don't ask hard questions that embarrass folks if you're a member of the council. That's an unfortunate reality of the way our politics works. And that has served us poorly in a lot of different ways. It's led to agencies that are just allergic to transparency. They don't consult with people, and they're not used to answering hard questions because they're never asked it. So that's the other piece of it, that I'm committed to making sure that oversight is a real thing on the council, that we actually hold people accountable for incompetence. And then when we see corruption, including from other members of the council, which is something that happened in recent years, that we call it out, and then we don't wait until, we can no longer, keep our head in the sand for any longer. We have got to be aggressive about that. And that's my vision for the district, for the ward, and why I'm running.
Now, what would you highlight from your past experience that would make you an effective council member to implement your vision and priorities?
So I'll say, I think 3 things. One, I was an elementary school teacher before I became an attorney, before I went to law school. I taught 5th grade social studies in a Title I school in Houston, Texas. And I think through that experience, I really have, I think, some insight into some of the problems with the way policymakers think about education. There are a lot of ideas that work well in boardrooms and conference rooms, but they don't work in classrooms because they weren't developed in consultation with teachers, with parents. They're just, they're not sort of relevant to the situation. And so we have got to approach schools in a different way. And I think that is something that I'm positioned to do. And I've laid out a vision of investing in teachers to help them grow as educators, and not, I believe in high expectations, but high expectations without support creates toxic work environments. I had many friends who worked in those schools, and they're no longer teachers, because that's what happens when you push people and you are hard on people without supporting them. And that's not an effective way to build a successful school system. The other thing is, I'm an attorney. I went to Yale Law School, and then afterwards I practiced law for a number of years at a large law firm in the district, focused on anti-corruption and antitrust work. So I have experience working on big investigations, complex matters, but more importantly, I think I have some insight into one of the problems that happens with legislating from the perspective of someone who's been a lawyer. People think of loopholes in laws as being just corruption related. And that is definitely a thing, especially in this town, where it sometimes happens in plain sight, some of the relationships with between contractors and city officials. But a lot of times loopholes happen because legislators are not careful, because they rely on their staff too much, or they are hungry for the tweet, hungry for the press release, and the bill is ready for that. The 2-page summary is ready to go out, but the bill is not. So I think I will bring a perspective there, some experience there, and a commitment to doing that well. And the other thing, I think that's sort of my whole campaign. I'm a parent. I have 2 small kids, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so I've lived the experience of the last 2 years of raising kids in the pandemic and seeing how our city has done some things well and some things very poorly, and not put families first. And so seeing that as a parent, seeing that as an ANC commissioner, now seeing that as a candidate, when I talk to people and hear about their concerns and about how the city often listens to other folks, that's something that I'm going to be focused on.
Thanks for that. Now for our final question, Ben, what else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
So, I sort of talked about it. I think, policy is super important. And I've laid out a lot of very detailed ideas on my website at benbergmann.com. I made a point before I started asking for money or collecting signatures that I put out a platform. And I'm proud of that. And there are a lot of good ideas there. But I think the most important thing for a voter is to think about who is the person who's going to be there when new things come up. How are they going to approach issues? And my, the way I talk to people about it is I have certain values. I'm a proud progressive, but I want to get things done. And I think it's important that we be focused on making progress. Sometimes progress is small. Sometimes progress is big. And we have to be willing to do that big stuff. That's something I think that it's been a problem in the district, that we're afraid to do those big things, those big leaps, because maybe it won't work out. It's better to just keep doing what we're doing. We can't do that any longer, especially with these challenges. But we also have to be content with some smaller incremental progress. And that requires having a vision, having plans, and seeing how those things fit in. And that's why I laid out a bunch of detailed ideas heading into the race. I think the other thing is, like I said earlier, we need an independent voice on the council, and I will be that. I am not connected to the political machine. I am, I'm an ANC commissioner and chair of the ANC for ANC 3D, but I'm not, part of any of the various groups that are control factions in the DC government, in the DC politics. My signs are, not a particular color that you would know. And I think that's important, not to, it's important because one of the problems in our city is that people do not feel pressure to do better in politics. The goal is to just keep doing what's been working. And that is fine when there aren't serious challenges. And we need people to push. We need people to push our school system. We need people to push our housing system. How is it that there are council members who are heads of committees who don't know basic facts about the agencies that they regulate? It's because the oversight hearings that they've presided over have not been serious exercises. They've been meet and greet, smile affairs. Everything's doing great. Tell us about how wonderful you are. That's not the way we make progress. And so that is my commitment to Ward 3 voters. I will be very transparent about where I stand. I will listen to everybody. I've made a point of I respond to every questionnaire. I tell people things they don't want to hear, not just things they do want to hear. And I explain why. And I think that is important. And that's something Mary did very well. And voters need to think about not just who they're picking, but who they're picking to replace Mary Che. And I think if you think about it from that perspective, I hope you'll choose me.
Okay, Ben Bergmann, running for the office of Ward 3 Council Member. Thank you for carving out time to be with us here today on Candidate Conversations at DCTV. And much success to you in your campaign.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be with you.
We have with us today Beau Finley, running for the office of Ward 3 Council Member. Hello, Beau.
Hello, Michele. Thank you for having me.
We're glad you're here. So let's get started with the first question. What is your vision for Ward 3 and our city's future, and what will you do as the Ward 3 Council Member to achieve that vision?
Well, thank you for the question. I think my view for Ward 3 and the district is to have a city that's less divided between the haves and the have-nots, to have a city where everybody has the opportunity to thrive, to grow, and to age in place. We've got single moms working multiple jobs just to, feed their family. That shouldn't be the case. We need to provide for them. We've got children who are, age 2, 3, 4, and they need nutrition. They need pre-kindergarten. We need to provide for them. And we need to make sure our schools are top-notch, not just in Ward 3, where we're very lucky to have great schools, but across all of the district. And we also, of course, more than anything, need more affordable housing. As housing costs have gone up, lots of people have had to make choices about their health care, about whether to start a family. And these are tough choices, and they shouldn't have to happen just because housing costs are so high. So we need to build more affordable housing at every level of affordability, from 0% to 30%, which is considered deeply affordable housing, and then from 30% to 80%, which is considered more workforce housing. We need to do that as soon as we can. We can do it in Ward 3. We've got lots of great places for it. For example, in Cleveland Park along the business district, in Woodley Park along the business district, there's great places to add more housing, especially affordable housing. It's transit accessible and near our schools. So I would like to do that, and I'd like to improve the schools across the district. I think that there's a lot to be done with capital upkeep, to ensure that roofs aren't leaking, that doorknobs are on doors, and that schools are safe, so that when children are there to learn, they're not, afraid or nervous or insecure in any way. And the way I'd want to do all this, well, on council with housing, I'd like to add a lot more tools to our housing toolbox. So we've got what's called the Housing Production Trust Fund. We don't fully fund it, and that fund is used to bridge the gap between sort of what private developers want to build and what DC would like them to build in terms of affordable housing. And we can fully fund that to incentivize more affordable housing, but we also need to think about increased incentives, such as something akin to the federal low-income housing tax credit. We have something like that already for Ward 3 specifically, but I'd like to see a deeper one that goes a little further and pushes for more affordable housing, especially deeply affordable housing, for which we're grossly lacking in the city. I'd also like to invest in social housing. Social housing is a model that's worked incredibly well in Singapore, in Vienna, Austria, and even in Boston, Massachusetts. Social housing is 1/3 deeply affordable housing, 1/3 affordable housing, including workforce housing, and 1/3 market rate housing. And the market rate housing helps subsidize all the other housing. And when you have a project that is built that way, you can include community amenities like a fitness center, a playground, maybe even a pool, to encourage community investment in the social housing facility. It's been very successful elsewhere, and I think it could be a great model here and a great way to increase our affordable housing stock.
Thanks for that, Beau.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Also on council, what I'd like to do is take a look at our policing. Because right now, a lot of people don't feel safe. And we all have a right to be safe. So we need to figure out what we're doing with our policing. Right now, in the short term, we can do things like encourage folks to participate in the security camera rebate program, which you can use your footage to help police officers investigate crimes. And also the cameras act as deterrents. But we also need to, in the long term, invest in community policing. Now, when we had Kathy Lanier as our police chief, we had some form of community policing, and crime was at its lowest in decades. So I'd like to get the police out of their cars and back onto patrolling the streets by foot. And before we do anything like throw more money into the police, we've got a great budget for them. We've got the 6th largest police force in the country, despite not being the 6th largest city. I'd like to make sure our approach is correct before we start addressing the size of the police force. And so that's it on policing, on housing, and on education. I'll go back to for a second. We really need to make sure that folks who are at risk of falling in with the wrong crowd are given the resources they need to not do so. So we need to make sure that our at-risk youth funding, which is for low-income folks, is available throughout the entirety of the DC public school system. So I think there are a lot of great ways to do that, and I look forward to talking more about it another time.
And I'm sure the residents of DC will appreciate that plan for thriving and growing. So thanks for that. Now, Beau, what would you highlight from your past experience that would make you an effective council member to implement your vision and priorities?
Aside from my charm? So I've spent about 14 years as a federal attorney, and I worked on a variety of programs at the Federal Communications Commission, some of which did a lot of great work. One of which was the low-income telephone program called Lifeline, and that provides phone access and internet access to low-income households. And one of the things I was very proud about doing when I was at the FCC was being able to expand the eligibility from about 42 million households to about 50 million households. Because phone service is literally something that connects us to the rest of society. Internet service is what connects us. So we absolutely need to make sure that folks have that sort of thing. Now, I've got the experience doing that. I also have done economic development work on tribal lands, and I've served as an ANC commissioner for the past 5.5 years, with the most recent year and a half as chair of ANC 3C. And there I've encountered a lot of community issues and helped sort of work toward consensus and work toward to positions that everybody in the community can support. For example, the Cleveland Park service lane, which is a major issue in Cleveland Park where I live, in the Quebec House. The service lane, some folks want it kept open for parking, and some people want it closed permanently, so for sort of cafe-style seating, like in Paris or Amsterdam. And we've got this great project happening now that's sort of merging the best of both worlds. We'll have parking during the day and cafe seating in the evening. It'll be done in about 18 months, and I hope to be on the council then to help christen the opening. But that sort of thing, along with maybe the Brooks, the Ward 3 short-term family housing, that was something I'm very proud of. When I joined the ANC, the Brooks was possibly not going to be open in Ward 3. It was heavily opposed in my community, and the reason why was people were afraid their property values would go down, and they didn't want to have recently unhoused people living near them. But we worked really hard to get folks on board, and there were wonderful coalitions that formed, including the Washington Interfaith Network and Ward 3 for All. And we work together to push and encourage our community to be accepting of unhoused people and help them get a leg up and give them a hand up rather than a hand out. We're able to do this. And I think the Ward 3 shelter right now, the short-term family housing, is the most successful program we have in our DC shelter system. So I'm really proud of the work there and getting the community behind it and making sure it would be a success in the long run.
Great work, Beau. Now, what else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
Well, I think, we can all work together to make sure that the main theme of my campaign is dignity and making sure people are treated with dignity. And I think working together is the only way to get there. We need to make sure that our social services that are offered to folks treat them with dignity. We need to make sure that when somebody is, having to prove that they don't make a certain amount of money, that we don't force them to trek around the city day after day, proving that they're so poor that they must participate in our housing programs or healthcare programs. We need to make sure that those folks are treated with dignity, as we do our caseworkers who, they're client managers and they're overworked. They've got 50 clients, 100 clients who are supposed to see in 2 weeks. If you see somebody, you've got 100 clients and you have to see them over 2 weeks, every single one, you only have about 48 minutes per client. And that's if you're not having lunch and you're not doing any paperwork. So we need to make sure that we bring dignity and respect back into our social services programs. Everything we do in DC with the government touches upon people's lives. At the end of the day, there is a life safety issue, whether it's traffic, whether it's housing, whether it's healthcare. So we need to keep that in mind and work toward a Ward 3 and a district that serves all and gives us all the opportunity to thrive and grow together.
Beau, we thank you so much for spending time with us here today at Candidate Conversations, and all the best to you in your campaign.
Thank you very much, Michele. If you're interested in finding out more, please go to beaufinley.com.
And we have joining us today on Candidate Conversations, Matthew Fruman, running for the seat of Ward 3 Councilmember. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Nice to see you this morning.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for being here. So, Matthew, what's your vision for Ward 3 and our city's future? And what will you do as the Ward 3 Councilmember to achieve that vision?
Thank you so much for that question. So my vision for Ward 3 and the city is that it be safe, affordable, green, and an increasingly great place to raise a family, learn, and age in place. And I know that sounds big, but in each of those areas, I've worked for 15 years and made a real difference. And I think I can make that difference here once on the council. The safety issue is first, and it's first on a lot of people's minds. And we need to increase the police force that we have today. We've gotten to a place where the police force has shrunk to smaller than it needs to be. I don't know exactly how many police we're going to need at the end of the day, but I do think that we need more than what we have today. But equally important are the other kinds of things that we need to do in order to address public safety. And that's taking some of the tasks off the police that are better suited to other professionals, whether it be traffic ticket writing or social workers dealing with some kinds of conflict situations inside of families. There's a lot of things that we place on the shoulders of our police that could be done by other people and maybe done better and free up our police officers to do frontline work on public safety. The other thing that we need to do is focus on the relationship between our police and our communities, particularly our communities that are the hardest hit by crime. We have a situation where there's a lack of trust today that is critical to the success of our communities and to the success of our police. And we need to very consciously work on rebuilding that. And so we can do that in lots of different ways. I like the idea of trying to hire more women to serve on the police force. They're not the only people who can be understanding and compassionate, but I think that women could add to our police force in an important way. we already have many great women who are on our police force, but I like the idea of encouraging more women to join. I like the cadet program, trying to get kids in our high schools to engage with the police and maybe find that as an eventual career path for them. Having a connection to the communities is key. We also have to focus on violence interruption. Yeah, many people know who the frequent perpetrators are, and they know what the beefs are that underlay some of these safety issues. And we need people who are skilled at getting in there and talking to these kids and helping turn them around before the terrible things happen. So it's really it's an all of the above approach on public safety. It's not a question of, can we not have police? Of course we have to have police, but we have to have the other components. And we really seriously have to focus on getting at the root causes of crime, which are poverty, lack of hope, a sense that nobody cares. Some of these teenagers feel like nobody cares about them or their lives. And we need to very intentionally show them that that's not the case. Education is a critical thing that goes to public safety, but it also is bigger than that. And we need to make sure, and I've spent a lot of time working on this, that in every community, families feel like there's a path from pre-K through high school that is part of their fabric of their community that will fully serve their children and will give their children a chance. In lots of parts of the city, people don't feel that way. In Ward 3, people do feel that way. They feel like they have a great path, and many people move to Ward 3 for that, and it ends up leading to overcrowding in our Ward 3 schools. We need to address the overcrowding in our Ward 3 schools, but a big piece of addressing the overcrowding in our Ward 3 schools is making sure schools in every part of the city are great, because nobody wants to put their kid on a bus to travel an hour and a half to get to school every day. We need to invest in communities throughout the city. And that may be the best way to invest in Ward 3. So making sure that people in every community feel like they have that critical amenity is super important. Green, the district has been a leader on environmental issues, and we really should continue to be. During Reconstruction, Charles Sumner, a senator from Massachusetts and a great abolitionist, said that the district should be an example for all of the land on social justice and equal rights for African Americans. And that vision is one that we need to apply today to the environment. And so that's a piece of what I want to see happen. And I'm going to wind up now, and I'm going to talk about seniors, hopefully in response to your next question, whether you ask about it or not.
Okay, thank you, Matthew, for that response. Now, what would you highlight from your past experience that would make you an effective council member to implement your vision and priorities?
So two things that I didn't talk about were affordability and seniors. And I'm going to wrap those two things into why it is that I'm so well equipped to do this job. 15 years ago, I began to get involved in local affairs in a way that was different than I had before. I'd been national and international in my focus. And some people asked me, would I serve on my ANC and would I work on the modernization of Wilson High School? And I decided to do both of those things. And frankly, the hook was set. When I got involved in local issues, I came to see how you could have such an impact on local issues. And I found my experience of the city so fascinating. And it's such a beautiful and wonderful city, and diverse, and all of the fabulous communities that we have in the city. And so engaging on that was really exciting for me. And I dug in a big way that has given me the kind of training that I think that I would need to serve on the council. So in the education space, just as an example, when we worked on the modernization of Wilson High School, I came to realize this is a piece of this is the school my children go to, but it's a piece of the city puzzle. And Wilson High School can't really succeed. Now Jackson Reed High School happily. Jackson Reed High School can't really succeed unless the other schools in the city are succeeding. And so I built a coalition called the Coalition for DC Public Schools and Communities, C4DC, that is made up of the education councils in all 8 wards and a number of advocacy groups, and we all work together to try to support schools around the city. So brick by brick, whenever something like this happens, it's not one person, there's a bunch of people, but I was the engine behind creating this coalition, which has had a very big effect in advocating for schools around the city, often leading to increases in school budgets, often for schools not in Ward 3, but in other parts of the city, but also sometimes in Ward 3, to support the project of having great schools from pre-K through high school throughout the city. That skill at coalition building will be really important on the council. That skill and the trust that I have built with people around the city who know that I have gone to bat for them and can hear me when I talk about an issue that's going to be important in Ward 3 will be a tremendous asset on the city council. So that I use that as an example of engagement around the city and coalition building generally. Affordability. We have a real issue in Ward 3 where I live, and I did a column in the Washington Post on this subject. In some parts of the city, people worry about development because it will lead to displacement. The tragedy in Ward 3 is we did our displacement 80 years ago, and it was very intentional. We did displacement and then exclusion. So much of the city has changed in different ways in the racial composition, but in Ward 3, it really hasn't changed. Ward 3 was essentially exclusively white in 1940, and 80 years later, it's the same. And even as other places have changed. So we need to have a very intentional strategy for how we're going to change that and increase diversity in Ward 3, increase affordability in Ward 3. And that's easy stuff to talk about, but it is trickier to achieve. And 2 things that I've done on that score is worked with the Washington Interfaith Network and built a coalition in support of affordable housing in Ward 3, and landed the first Housing Production Trust Fund Award in Ward 3, where we're going to build 93 units of deeply affordable senior housing on Western Avenue.
Great. Now for our final question, Matthew, what else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
So I'm gonna stay on some of the same themes that I was talking about before, because I do think that this is the key thing that will make me a great council member. And those things are the ability to work with people, listen, and come up with solutions that can get done, and the ability to build coalitions and the reach, not just in the ward, but across the city to forge alliances. And that's a thing that I will bring to the council. So I was talking about the affordable housing project that I've been a part of, and that's at the site of the Lisner Home, which is a assisted living nursing facility that serves low-income DC seniors, and I chair the board at the Lisner Home. And we came up with this idea of doing an affordable housing project on our site. We proposed it, we showed it to our neighbors, and they didn't like it. They were very, very unhappy. And I said to them, listen, we need to do this. It's important. It's important for the city. It's going to basically go where we're saying that it's going to go. It's going to basically be the size that we're proposing, but we'll talk with you about everything else. And our neighbors, you could see them looking at me thinking, what a pile that is. Like, he's just giving lip service to us. But we talked and we listened, and we came up with a new plan where we changed the way our building was oriented. We changed the way the cars entered, and lo and behold, our neighbors supported our project. So it breaks the stereotype, right? Ward 3, you think people fight everything. Well, our neighbors are the hero of this story, because when they felt like they were listened to and they felt like they had gotten a meaningful response, they turned around and supported an affordable housing project in their backyard. I feel like an enormous amount of credit goes to them. Some of the credit goes to me. Some of the credit goes to me because we listened to them. We tried to be responsive to them. We didn't overpromise up front. We were real with them from the start, and we got to where we needed to get. That's the kind of approach that I take on problem after problem. Another thing that I'll just talk about for a second is seniors, because I've been meaning to talk about it in response to each of your questions, and now I'm just going to do it. We have one of the largest senior populations in the district in Ward 3. Seniors throughout the city are a huge issue. We really need to make sure that we're focused on having our seniors have a great quality of life, that we're attending to their needs in terms of affordability, in terms of transportation is a huge issue for seniors, in terms of wellness programming and access to different kinds of things. And I worked with the head of Iona a few years back to pilot a program to do senior wellness programming, not in a dedicated senior wellness center, but rather in libraries and rec centers and churches all around the ward. And that has been a very, very successful program that I am very proud of. At the listener home, I'm focused on senior care. One of the issues that's important to me, and I think would be for many people, the more they focus on it, is there's an effort to raise the pay for child care workers. And it's really important that we do that. And the work that they do is extraordinary. But there is, at the other end of the life cycle, the caregivers, the home caregivers for our seniors. And I don't, I hope you haven't had this experience. I have had this experience where, at the end of my parents' life, they had people who cared for them in a way that was really extraordinary, and, that made their passing in their final years much, much easier. And they are people to whom I will be forever grateful. And we need to make sure that those people are paid appropriately. There's legislation now to try to increase the pay for home health care workers. And it's really important to do that, because these are people, they do hard work. They have to have a kind of patience and love in them that's really extraordinary to do the things that they do. And they make a huge difference to our families. So I want to help them. I want to help from our kids, giving them a great chance in life from the beginning, all the way to our seniors, and making their lives as full as possible later in life. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk.
And Matthew, thank you for your time here today at Candidate Conversations on DCTV. Much success to you in your campaign.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We have Eric Goulet joining us. He's running for the office of Ward 3 Council Member. Hello, Eric.
Hi, how are you doing today? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us. Now, what is your vision for Ward 3 and our city's future, and what will you do as a Ward 3 Council Member to achieve that vision?
Well, when I ran for the Ward 3 office, the first thing I wanted to do was talk to the residents here in Ward 3 and find out what their concerns were for the community. And we went to every neighborhood. We gathered what are called petition signatures to get on the ballot. And I listened to residents about what they wanted changed in the ward. And in many ways, the city's on a very good track, but there are things that we can do better. The number one concern of residents in Ward 3 was public safety. And that was in every neighborhood that I went to in the city. And what we need to do with public safety is make sure we increase the number of police officers we have from around 3,600 where we are right now to 4,000 to 4,200 officers, and put those officers out on bikes and into the communities so we have effective community policing in our neighborhoods. That will really get crime down. It's something I worked on with Chief Kathy Lanier when I served as budget director for the city. And Kathy Lanier was able to bring homicides down with 4,000 officers to a 50-year low. So I'd like to replicate that success again with Chief Conti, who's our chief and lives here in Ward 3. Additionally, what residents talked a lot about was school overcrowding in Ward 3. And I have a plan to address school overcrowding. First of all, we need to build exceptional new schools, not just in Ward 3, but then across the city. So parents will have options to be able to send their children to a public school of their choice. What I would really also like to focus on, though, is the pre-K 3 and 4 aspect of schooling in Ward 3. Right now, even though pre-K 3 and 4 is a right throughout the city, in Ward 3, those slots are not available in our neighborhood schools. So I would like to work with the chancellor upon election to make sure that we make available space within our Ward 3 schools so that every Ward 3 parent of a 3 and 4-year-old will be able to send their children to their neighborhood school for pre-kindergarten. I think to be able to do this, we need to take a realistic look at the boundaries right now, consider changes to those that reflect data, and then also just listen to our community about what they want. There's currently concerns about splitting Stoddard School. I think we need to slow that down and listen to the residents about maintaining communities where they feel like they've bought houses and invested their lives so that their children can go to a school in their neighborhood. A third concern that I've heard a lot about is the issue of making sure that we live within our means and that we be fiscally responsible in the city. And this is very important right now. DC has relied upon federal funding the last couple of years for its budget and then for the budget of the Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, also known as Metro. And what we need to do is make sure that that funding, when it starts to go away, is replaced by a responsible approach for Metro, probably dedicated regional funding. And then on our local side, we need to be very mindful of the fact that we have to control our spending and not just raise taxes again on our residents and our small businesses. So it's a mix of fiscal responsibility the residents are looking for, making sure we have adequate public safety in our neighborhoods, and then making sure all children in Ward 3 can attend school in a setting that is very conducive to their learning, all the way from age 3 up to 12th grade. And we need to make that happen. And I'm excited to listen to the residents of Ward 3 and get results as their next council member.
Eric, thanks for that response. Now for our next question, what would you highlight from your past experience that would make you an effective council member to implement your vision and priorities?
Well, we have 9 really nice people running in this race. It's a very crowded race. Mary Che was a 16-year council member who led the ward very effectively. And we need somebody with the same level of experience that Mary has to be able to step in and lead for the ward on day one. I bring that experience to the table. I've served 4 years as the DC Council Budget Director, and then 4 years as the Budget Director, managing a $14 billion budget for the entire city. And these are skills that are needed to be able to deliver projects in Ward 3 in the budget, which we really desperately need for our schools, for our new senior wellness center in the ward, and to be able to make sure we have transportation projects that work for everyone here in the ward. So those are the types of things that we need to bring through the budget. Additionally, we need a legislator who's an attorney here and can make sure that when bills are being moved on the council, they're not rushed and that we get them right the first time. And I've got the experience to be able to do that. I want to make sure we go through a public hearing process where we listen to all of our residents and we don't rush things and we get legislation right. So my experience working, 19 years in DC government, in virtually every branch of government. I've worked for the council, the executive branch. I've worked for the Office of the Attorney General and our Office of the Chief Financial Officer. So I've worked in many different areas, and I have the skill set to be able to step in and fill Mary Che's very big shoes on issues that are really important to the ward and deliver results here for Ward 3. Ward 3 needs a council member who's going to be a fighter for them down at the Wilson building, and I bring that experience to the job on day one.
Thanks for sharing that experience with us. Now, Eric, for our final question, what else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
Well, I'll talk about the softer side of me. I'm a father of 2 great young boys living in the Palisades. I've been a 20-year resident of Washington, D.C., and lived 17 years of that right here in Ward 3. What I want to see for my children and for all the children of the District of Columbia is a city that's a livable city where we have safe streets, where we have the best leadership on transportation and the environment, not just in the country, but in the world, because climate change is a very real concern. Mary Che, who's leaving us, was a champion on environmental issues. And I want to be able to step in and continue to lead on these important issues as the nation's capital and as a community here that wants to see more tree canopy, reliable bus service, and a clean environment for all our children. So that's the experience I think I bring to the city. I think we have a vision that includes everyone in the ward and an inclusive city for all. And my website is Eric for ward3.com. I encourage anyone to check it out. And if you have a question for us, send me an email or give me a call. I'd love to talk to you. And I look forward to meeting many of you in the community as I go out to speak with residents and try to get their support for this election. So thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I really appreciate it.
Eric Goulet, running for the office of Ward 3 Council Member. Thanks so much for carving out time once again, and continued success in your campaign.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
We have with us today David Krukhoff, running for the Ward 3 Council Member seat. Hello, David.
Good afternoon, Michele.
Good afternoon to you. So, David, what is your vision for Ward 3 and our city's future, and what will you do as the Ward 3 Council Member to achieve that vision?
Well, my vision for Ward 3 and for the council is fairly much the same. I look to have a diverse council. I'm running as the conscientious, centrist Republican that we need in office to provide a more balanced checks and balances on the council, and for us to have a more broad environment for the polite discourse, and also the fiscal responsibilities that we need on the council. So it is my belief that the council over the last decade, but more strenuously in the last 5 years, or last term, let's say last 4 years, has become too much associated with political activism that has not helped us prosper as a city. And we see crime being elevated, we see our population going down, and I'm here to politely ask to put the brakes on some of the aspirational goals that the council has, and to elect someone who can provide a different point of view and can to work with the council to, I think, to provide better decisions. So in the idea of livability and checks and balances, those are the two themes of our campaign. And I'm hopeful that in this cycle, in this ward, that we will be victorious and advance to the council in November. I'll be all the way here throughout the election cycle because I'm unopposed on the ballot as in the primary, which is coming up in June. So you'll be seeing a lot of me. I look forward to learning from everybody, to bonding with you, and to, I hope, to incorporating your ideas and passions into our campaign, but to provide a balance to the council, or at least a partial balance to the council from Ward 3.
Thanks, David, for that response. Now tell us, what would you highlight from your past experience that would make you an effective council member to implement your vision and priorities?
Well, I'm kind of a deal maker. I'm in commercial real estate, so I like to engage with parties and try to create win-win transactions. So, but I like to listen to different points of view, and I'm also a member of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. So I'm basically looking to be a bridge at the council, and to I hope, with empathy and creativity and thinking outside the box, to have DC run well. One can argue that it is not running as well as it should, that DCRA, that it takes too long to pull a permit, that there's too much crime, that smash and grabs are too common, that juveniles are not being prosecuted enough. And I'm here to listen to the points of view of the community, particularly the community in Ward 3, of which I'm a part and which I'm a third generation Washingtonian in, and to I hope, stem the tide, to stop the now drop in population, and to work with the council to change in a positive manner.
Great. Now for our last question, what else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
Well, I would like them to know that I'm not afraid, that I will listen to their feedback. I will be involved in constituent services, that I'm not afraid of interfacing with the federal government in terms of the National Park Service or the Department of Interior. I'm not afraid of interfacing or interacting with the Attorney General if I believe that that prosecutions are not being thoroughly performed. I'm not afraid of working with the school system and my fellow council members to make sure that we have an education that is the most vibrant for our students, and one that is not necessarily focused on social promotion, but also challenging for all students. So I'm looking to do all these things, and I want to be realistic. I'm not going to be the aspirational candidate who has a vision zero or something that is aspirational, but yet has no real likelihood of being effective. I don't believe in unmet expectations. What I believe in is thoughtful discourse, thoughtful policy, and positive change for us in the District of Columbia. And it starts in Ward 3, where I'm from, in terms of, I hope, being an outpost for that point of view. Obviously, I have to represent Ward 3 and care about Connecticut Avenue. I'm the only candidate who is opposed to the diminishment of Connecticut Avenue in terms of motorists. I think that the council, and I think it's overemphasizing things that are anti-motorist. I'm looking to make DC livable. And it's my concern when I speak with constituents, and I do that every day, that DC is having a tough time in being as livable as it can be. It was growing for decades, and now it's not. And there's a reason for that. We have to make a change. And I believe that I'm the person for that change. There has never been a non-Democrat elected to the council from a ward. I look to break through that. If you can imagine this is a monopoly, think of me as the Federal Trade Commission, and the monopoly is Standard Oil 1910. I wish to break through, and I hope that people will join me and believe in this. I know that there is sort of inertia against a non-Democrat winning at the ward level. In this cycle, in this ward, with me as our candidate, we can win. And when we do, we will make a historic change for a better council for the District of Columbia and a better body politic for our city that can better interface with the federal government, with Congress, and with our neighbors.
David, thanks again for being here, and much success to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and much success to you as well.
We have joining us Monte Monash, running for the office of Ward 3 Council Member. Hello, Monte.
Hello, Michele.
Thank you for joining us. So we're going to get started with our first question. So Monte, what is your vision for Ward 3 and our city's future? And what will you do as the Ward 3 Council Member to achieve that vision?
Hey, thank you for having me, and thank you for the question. So my vision for Ward 3 is really to have a story of reimagination. Ward 3 is changing so much, just like the rest of the city. And with the rest of the city, Ward 3 needs to change. We need to evolve. And DC faces a lot of challenges brought on by the pandemic. We've gone through the summer of racial injustice of 2020. We've gone through all kinds of economic inequalities over the years, and we continue to face those challenges. And we can't accept the status quo of what's happening in our city, in our country today. So I really want to look at, as a vision, how can we do better by our residents of Ward 3 and throughout the city? And how do we do that is really focusing on the redevelopment of our main streets, focusing on working with the city to make sure that we have a new school here in Ward 3. We're looking at a site right now that we've already acquired. So that school needs to be developed and built out, and we need to have surrounding resources, things for those high school students to do before and after school. And since it won't just be a neighborhood school, there'll be students coming from all over the city. We need to make sure that they can get there and that the transportation it makes sense for that travel pattern, so that we won't put additional stresses on that neighborhood and the streets there. We need to focus on making sure that in our schools that teachers are accommodated for, that they have a place to live with workforce housing, that they are trained in a way that makes them feel very secure in their job, and they're able to teach the students that are in their building. We also need to offer them resources, which is development in their field, so that they can get those continuing education credits and also go and explore spaces that they are hoping to, fill out their resume with. And we want to nurture that curiosity of advancement and growth, so that they can stay in our school system and benefit our youth. We also want to look at making sure that our school system stays the same. We want to have that mayoral control stay with the schools in the district, because going back to the 80s when I was growing up, I remember what it was like to be in that kind of school situation where there was not enough accountability and clear direction on how the school system should be run. So we're doing great now. We want to keep that kind of system going. I want to focus on as a vision point to make sure that we have housing for all incomes, whether they be seniors or families or workforce employees coming into the ward and living in the ward as they work. So that's going to create a lot of opportunity for us to reimagine again on our main streets with growth and development and housing. And how do we do that? We have to use some of the tools that the district has already created and think of some new ones as well, offering more opportunities to have limited co-op situations, so that people that come into these affordable housing units will actually be able to own them and walk out of that with some limited equity. So those are opportunities that I'd like to talk about more in this ward. I think that we should really make sure that our economy is competitive. How do we do that? We need to incentivize businesses to come to our community. We need to incentivize developers to come and develop different types of communal experiences in our community. And those things will all come from the council level vision. And I think that we all talk about this a lot, but we're talking about, bike lanes and protected bike lanes and getting people in the buses more. So having senior citizens ride the bus for free, and having all DC students, not just the DCPS students, but all DC students ride the bus for free. And then I have some ideas about making sure that we reach those 2032 clean energy goals. First and foremost, I would love for us to ban plastic bottles. I think that there's no need for it. It contributes to the global waste, and we could do something to eliminate that from our footprint here in Washington, D.C. And then really, I think the last thing, and it's not the least, but the last thing is focusing on our seniors, making sure they're able to age in place and be, to live in this community as they need to transition from maybe coming out of their house, but going into a different housing situation within the ward, and having some recreational activities for them as well in this ward.
Thank you for that. Also, Monte, what would you highlight from your past experience that would make you an effective council member to implement your vision and priorities?
Right. So I'm a mother first and foremost, and my family is very important, and I think that I probably spend a lot of time doing things with my children that maybe they would probably like me to dial it back, but that's okay. So as a parent, I think that I bring a lot of focused attention. I think moms do things highly efficiently because we have so many things to get done that we make sure that our day is completely compartmentalized. And so the efficiencies come out of that, packed day. So as a parent raising 2 school-age boys, that makes me, really efficient with my time so that I can make sure that I do have that family time at home. I also understand what it's like for parents in our school systems. I have one son in a DCPS school, and I have another son that's in an independent school in our ward. And I get a different perspective of both sides of the spectrum with how the schools work and how efficiently they can be, or how they can nurture our children. And knowing that as a parent, participating in the school and being connected to the school environment also really does make a huge difference. So being a parent really does help me with that qualifier, because in the ward, we're really talking about schools a lot here, as we are throughout the district. The other thing is, as a business owner, I've owned my own business for 15 years. I work with engineering companies and construction companies, and we do infrastructure projects throughout the district and in the region. And in doing that work, it gives me the opportunity to work with about 13 DC government agencies in many different capacities, from facilitating meetings with stakeholders to just doing project work activity, from programs on all the way down to small design projects. So that kind of work really gives me an idea and a vision into what it takes to do business in this city. So for example, the regulatory, maybe there's some obsolete licenses that you have to get, or obsolete permits that you need to get as a business owner. Those things would be in front of mind for me to help us make our business offering, to keep us open, much more at the table with attracting more businesses, because I understand the frustration of trying to get through some of those things. The other thing is that I've done a lot of work with state and local governments. Throughout my career, I've worked with mayors and governors, and I've had the opportunity to understand what are the best practices from other cities, and work with trade associations to understand how governments function in an efficient way. And so that would be a really strong perspective that I would bring to the council. And then the last thing would be my community and civic leadership. I'm very proud of the time that I've given to organizational work, whether it be community or be appointed positions. I've spent some very dedicated time to make sure that where my heart feels right is what I'm putting my time and effort to. So being on the Seabury board for aging resources, working as the chair of the DC Public Library System, being on the Friendship Place board, which is a homelessness organization, as well as the Women's Policy Initiative Office of the Mayor. Those kind of things have helped me really be connected to our ward as well as citywide.
Okay, thanks for that. Now, wrapping up with our last question, Monte, what else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
So this question is great, because I want people to know that I am a native Washingtonian, that I've lived in Ward 3 for 21 years. My husband and I have been very involved with community work, as well as volunteering for the city in appointed positions. And I think that that's very important, to be civically minded and giving back in all kinds of ways. So that's been very important to us. My family, my children, my boys, they are, in schools here, and being involved in their schools, that has been a big commitment of mine. Also, being associated with working with seniors has been important, and also the infrastructure projects, the big work that keeps that health and safety piece in our city is a big commitment of mine. It's been a focus of mine for nearly 20 years, and I am very much involved with making sure that we have, flood resiliency, that we have power line undergrounding, as well as our roads and highways and bridges and water and wastewater is all healthy and safe for us here in the district. I also want to make sure that we continue to talk about public safety, about the crime in our city. I've seen that there's been a lot of things that have changed over the years. We've gone up and down with our crime, but supporting Chief Conte's request for 4,000 police officers is extremely important, because we do need to get a handle on that. We need to have gun sense which is common sense. I want to make sure that we are also focused on providing, green space and supporting our environmental efforts here in the ward. Mary Chey was a champion for that. I'd love to continue her vision and add a twist to it by, like I said before, banning plastic bottles. So, really continuing to let people know that I'm a part of this community. I have served in many different capacities, and I will continue to do the same thing for this ward to get things done, to be open and available on a constituent services basis, and open and available as a member of the council.
Monte Monash, thank you for joining us today with Candidate Conversations on DCTV. Much success to you.
I really appreciate it, Michelle. Nice to meet you.
Today we have with us Phil Thomas, running for the office of Ward 3 Council Member. Hello, Phil. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well also. Thank you for joining us on Candidate Conversations. Okay, we'll get started with the first question. What's your vision for Ward 3 and our city's future, and what will you do as the Ward 3 Council Member to achieve that vision?
Yes, the District of Columbia is very fortunate that people want to live, work, and visit because of the quality of life. As a Ward 3 Council Member, I work with the Mayor's Office and the Council to revitalize downtown, support small businesses that are still struggling, and energize the district recovery from the effort of the pandemic. We do not currently have a large downtown residential population like other major cities or countries do, which has hampered downtown economically recover. I will support using existing inclusionary zoning policies to create more affordable units downtown by converting office space into affordable housing, which in return stabilize downtown, increase residential population, and bring small businesses back, decrease traffic, and realizing a thriving downtown. When it comes to Ward 3, we have to revisit our major corridors and see what we can add density by taking into account the character of a neighborhood. As the next Ward 3 Council Member, I'll work with the community stakeholders to envision a Ward 3 where seniors, teachers, public safety officers have housing, a senior wellness center, a new school, more transit options, and decreasing crime. We definitely have to revisit our neighborhood, as we can't put affordable housing in, and we can't consolidate it in one community. Every neighborhood needs to do their fair share. I will work with the community stakeholders to envision that as we have ample opportunity at Chevy Chase with the small area plan, as well as the Friendship Heights corridor, as we have a lot of vacant space over there as well. We can put housing, workforce housing, as well as other amenities that the community will love.
Thanks for that, Phil. Now, what would you highlight from your past experience that would make you an effective council member to implement your vision and priorities?
Yes. So I started as a two-term ANC commissioner in 2010. I really got involved with the community. From there, I went on to serve on the executive board of my second district Citizens Advisory Council, as well as my neighborhood association, while still being a public school teacher in the District of Columbia. From there, I transitioned over from teaching, after teaching for 7 years, to being the Ward 3 liaison for the mayor's office, where I worked on bread and butter issues like getting streets paved, potholes fixed, as well as getting trash picked up, as we call those the bread and butter issues, as working with the government to cut the bureaucracy to help the District of Columbia residents and also Ward 3 residents as well. I went on to continue my community involvement and community experience by becoming chair of the Ward 3 Democrats, as well as the president of the Federation of Community Associations. I then went on and served at the Department of Parks and Recreation, where I worked on projects like the Hearst Park and Pool project and getting the first outdoor swimming pool built, which opens up next month. So I can't wait to do a cannonball, as well as working on W Park, as well as Carolina Park. And then when the pandemic hit, I transitioned and put my head down and got to work for the District of Columbia residents, where I worked at the Department of Employment Services to make sure that, and help with the call center to make sure residents receive their money when they lost their job, as well as I worked at Department of Public Works, where, as you know, they had a lot of frontline workers that got hit with COVID. So I made sure that leaf got collected and as well as snow got picked up. And when the vaccination became available, I led the COVID-19 Community Corps, which basically promoted the vaccine in underserved communities. So when we started in June, vaccination rate in wards 5, 7, 8 were at single digits. When we ended, we doubled the number of getting individuals vaccinated, which was, as we know, the District of Columbia is one of the highest vaccination rates across the country. And I like to say I played a major part in that. So my experience in the community for over a decade, being involved for over a decade in the community, to also have government experience working for the mayor and cutting through the bureaucracy to help the district residents and improving results. I can point to things not just in a single community in Ward 3, but every neighborhood in every community in Ward 3, I can point to things that I have done. So I'm a candidate that has community experience, government experience, improving results. So I can, and I would bring that to the council, as I know the community stakeholders. I have a proven track record of getting things accomplished that can better Ward 3, and I plan to bring that to as the next Ward 3 council member.
Sounds like great work, Phil. Now for our last question, what else would you like voters to know about you or your vision for DC?
Yes, I would like voters to understand that I'm investing in Ward 3. I moved to Ward 3 in 2009 to take care of my grandparents and my great aunt. My great aunt's 105. I want to work with the community and immediately get involved. I became an elementary school teacher at Mundo Verde and was elected an ANC commissioner. My job as the Ward 3 liaison has definitely shaped my experience in community involvement as well. I want voters to understand that my public service as the director of the mayor's office of the Clean City, that was my last job I left before I went to go run for office, and I worked on environmental equity issues across the District of Columbia. I have been proud to serve Ward 3 for more than a decade. My community and government experience has prepared me to serve as your next Ward 3 council member. My core vision and values of my campaign, and I will take it to Ward 3, is coordination between the executive and the council, transparency with tough oversight, and tough oversight over the council and tough oversight over the government agencies, and engagement for everybody feeling heard. So coordination, transparency, engagement. And you can find out more information on my website, philforward3.com. And I'm asking the voters to elect me as the next Ward 3 council member.
Thanks, Phil. We appreciate all of the work you've done and continue to do in the community. Much success to you in your campaign from all of us here on Candidate Conversations at DCTV.
Thank you for having me.
We thank all the candidates for joining us. The District of Columbia will be holding its primary elections on June 21st, 2022. We'll see you this fall ahead of the general election in November. For DCTV, I'm Michele McCray.